As it has always been, when one generation of consoles transitions into another, we are presented with what appear to be fresh ideas underneath a sheen of unparalleled graphical fidelity. Put into development at a time in which the old system's potential has been all but tapped out, these titles are our first glimpses into the future of what a new console generation is capable of. More often than not, however, many of these concepts that serve as transitional titles fail to meet their targets in both the eyes of the makers as well as the public itself, drawing ire from all sides regardless of how the final product presents itself. Watch Dogs is one such victim of this rather unfortunate situation. Its reveal at E3 2012 drew amazed looks from all around, but the diligent and steadfast among us, however, still remember what Killzone 2 was really supposed to be. Ubisoft's darling new IP has been the subject of great anticipation and yet also great trepidation in the months leading up to release. Could it really meet the expectations of a demanding gaming public that wishes to see their $400 consoles put to full use? Can this new series capture the sweeping narrative potential Assassin's Creed has been trying to get for the past 7 years? Does Watch Dogs mark the beginning of a bright future for this new generation? Or is it simply a last-gen hack job? Chicago is one of the most storied cities in the United States, though the most popular bits of its history do not come from something to be proud of. The greatest of these stories hail from the 1920s, in which mobsters like Al Capone ruled the streets through fear and intimidation. Despite having wished otherwise, Chicago remains one of the most dangerous cities in North America to this day. In Watch Dogs, Chicago's government has a new weapon for a new age: the Central Operating System. A city-scale network of mainframes, the CTOS controls most of the infrastructure of the city, from street lights to water pumps, electricity to emergency services, all built on a vast grid of surveillance cameras placed specifically to combat crime. It's a wet dream for the NSA, but at its heart lies a dark secret: its true potential as a monitoring system that manipulates our lives and sees everything we do. Thought impenetrable, the CTOS is a vulnerable system that has been long since hacked. An anonymous hacker collective known as DedSec tries to warn the public of the threat the system holds for its citizens, while tech-savvy gangsters access its weak points to further their own ends. In the middle stand fixers, mercenaries that can bend the CTOS to their own will, using advanced hacking tools at the behest of the highest bidder. Aiden Pierce, our hero, is one such fixer. On a typical night in 2012, Aiden and his partner Damien infiltrate the Merlot Hotel on a routine money-siphoning heist. In the middle of the job, however, another hacker appears and penetrates the same network, exposing the two. Pierce is identified by an unknown group who put out a hit on him, resulting in the death of his niece Lena during the ensuing attempt on his life. Grief-stricken, Aiden makes it his life's mission to protect his remaining family and punish those responsible. Aiden Pierce's story aims to take a trip down the digital rabbit hole in a quest to get vengeance for his niece, but it never really gets to that point with any flair or excitement. While the story does come full circle and resolves almost all plot elements, some are left purposefully unresolved, more than likely just for DLC or sequel purposes, it doesn't particularly do so in an enjoyable manner. The problem with the overall plot is twofold: the characters themselves and the manner in which the story is presented. Aiden Pierce's unique character abilities, i.e. the manipulation of the CTOS, as well as his plot situation, has the potential to make him into a great vigilante hero, but instead of fleshing him out, he becomes all but one-dimensional. Occasionally he'll reminisce about his actions and whether he's morally justified in committing them, but once that 15-second moment passes, we're back on the streets being chased by the police, hacking into people's lives, and taking on hordes of gangsters. Similarly, the rest of the Watch Dogs cast rarely show enough emotion or character development to put them even in the vicinity of being memorable. The other problem resides in just how Ubisoft chose to present the game's story. While the game does fairly well at linking consecutive events together, that's mainly just how the story plays out as a whole. The game begins in media res, showing us 2 minutes of cutscenes for the prologue before jumping forward nearly a year later without really addressing the consequences of what we just saw. It's unreasonable to expect the audience to establish a relationship with our main character if we're thrown smack dab in the middle of a revenge story, and while I appreciate some of Aiden's motivation, there remains a significant disconnect. In addition, Watch Dogs chooses to ignore characters once their arc has been completed, leaving some to unknown fates, while at the same time never establishing more than Pierce's personality outside of an intro or outro mission cutscene. It's very dry, making it clear that this is a game far more motivated by gameplay than story. If Ubisoft intends to make this into a series, it would be in their best interest to rectify this.
I need a distraction. I called the cops. You did? Oh, yeah.
At its heart, Watch Dogs is very much a typical sandbox crime drama game focused on a uniquely powerful character of unquestionable tactical fortitude. Players will explore a vast city environment filled to the brim with police, gangsters, and everyone else caught in between. The selling twist that attempts to separate this new title from being yet another Grand Theft Auto clone is Aiden Pierce's fixer abilities, which allow him almost unprecedented control over his digitally powered environment. Throughout the Watch Dogs experience, Aiden is given the ability to manipulate many of the machine-run elements throughout the environment. Utilizing their access to the CTOS, players can control most of the infrastructure in Chicago, such as traffic lights, bridge controls, and various electrical utilities. The most common tool players will utilize during their time in Chicago is the Profiler, an app on Aiden's phone that analyzes the NPCs in the environment and returns information about them. These tools, while usable at almost any given time in the game, are best utilized contextually in terms of what's going on around you. While sure, you can use the CTOS to terrorize the city by causing traffic jams, blackouts, and electrical explosions everywhere, they are far more useful when you use them against the gangs or cops that chase you throughout the Windy City streets. Outside of the core story missions that appear in the game, Watch Dogs offers a variety of side quests and standalone missions that become progressively more available as the game continues. Fixer contracts will task you to drive a car from one side of the city to the other while completing various objectives. Gang hideouts assign you to infiltrate a fortress and take down the head honcho, and so on and so forth. Over time, new linked quests appear that have you taking on human trafficking rings, gun runners, and, for the most part, these are fun little diversions. That being said, Watch Dogs also has a huge amount of collectibles in the world that give you further insight into the game's background characters, in the form of everybody's favorite exposition format, audio logs. Oh boy. Digital trips are easily the best side mission highlight to be found in Watch Dogs. Much like the underutilized drugging sequences seen only a handful of times throughout Far Cry 3, these electronic-based trips serve as mini-games that are very enjoyable diversions from everything else found throughout the rest of the game. One trip, for example, has you taking on the controls of a giant mechanical spider tank that climbs buildings and wreaks havoc across the streets, while another has Aiden driving a Mad Max-esque armored muscle car through a Chicago hellscape running over demons. Everything to be had here is quite fun, and should definitely be one of the first things you experience during your time with the game. One of the most anticipated aspects of the game is the random nature by which events can happen in the world, specifically how crimes can seemingly occur out of nowhere. While these events can happen without notice, the CTOS will frequently identify pending crimes that occur proximate to Aiden's location. The player, should they choose, can visit the area and utilize the profiler to identify the victim and his or her aggressor. Strangely though, Watch Dogs forces you to actually wait until the crime is in progress rather than prevent it from happening entirely, eventually leading even the most prepared players into a foot chase if you choose to go in for the non-lethal takedown. Unlike the rather slick presentation of such events we received in February of last year, these foot chases usually devolve into running down a sidewalk for a considerable amount of time, as there are only occasional CTOS tools like junction boxes or circuit breakers that can impede the NPC's movement. Given this, and the fact that Aiden cannot outpace any NPC in the world, the result is a chase that can last several minutes that is a drag rather than exhilarating, eventually making these missions something you want to avoid. The random crime system is only the start of a variety of design choices that are either questionable or entirely missing. Seemingly to emphasize the CTOS system, Watch Dogs does not allow the player to fire a weapon while driving a vehicle, a staple of almost every crime-based sandbox title on the market. In addition, oddities begin to appear when you take a look at how the game's background elements work. Bus stops, for example, are littered throughout Chicago, with people waiting patiently for their ride to arrive, and yet there is not a single bus to be found in the game. Motorcycles can be quite easily found in the environment, and yet none of the NPCs in the game, other than the one in the opening cutscenes, ever actually drive one. Watch Dogs does not feature a proper melee combat system, save for a one-press takedown maneuver. instead forcing you to rely on your weaponry and the CTOS during a firefight. These and several more confusing or omitted design choices appear throughout the game, and while they don't necessarily detract from the overall experience, they certainly don't add to it. Apart from Watch Dogs' core gameplay, Ubisoft has included online multiplayer that, in many instances, takes inspiration from Japanese developer From Software's famous Souls series. While the game does feature the standard allotment of sandbox multiplayer modes such as free roam, racing, and objective-based team combat, the invasion mechanic from the Souls series makes an appearance to a delightful degree. In online hacking, one player invades another's world, appearing always as an NPC to the opponent but always as item to themselves. In this Turing test mode, one player attempts to hack the other by hiding within a certain radius, while the victim attempts to hunt them down using the profiler. If the aggressor is identified, they must retreat as they are not allowed to kill the target. Online hacking is incredible fun, and as it can happen at almost any time outside of a mission, players should always be on the guard for an invading fixer. Sadly, the launch of Watch Dogs has been a bit tumultuous, as excessive wait times for invasion attempts can quite often lead to failed connections. This, coupled with it being quite hard to locate a lucrative contract, will try the player's patience. Interested players should take note, however, that while you can turn off the invasion mechanic, the game will reset your in-game notoriety, forcing you to build it back up once you turn it back on. It becomes a decision then. Play with it on and expect to engage in multiplayer, or turn it off and never do so for as long as you play. As one of the first confirmed next-generation games presented in 2012, Watch Dogs bore the distinction of being one of the visual powerhouses that would lead us into a bright future of graphical fidelity. As has been purported since late last year, the final product only contains a portion of the visual package that was presented to the public at E3 2012. Aside the visual effects, everything from texture models to environmental detail, animations to in-game physics are nowhere near the quality that we saw 2 years ago. While the package we have is still visually entertaining, the visuals are still disappointing by comparison. In the audio department, what we get is once again a mixed bag. The game's voice acting certainly has potential, but Noam Jenkins, who plays Aiden Pierce, doesn't even come close to the presentation Brian Bloom brought to BJ Blazkowicz. Man, that's a comparison I never thought I'd make. It doesn't help that most of the game's script is missing a hefty amount of raw emotion or depth. You cannot make the audience care about a character when only their words convey who they are, and it seems that the core team that worked on Watch Dogs didn't get that memo. Perhaps they should go next door and take some notes from the Assassin's Creed team.
Except that's just a game.
Watch Dogs is a game of many contradictions. It wants to be a great story experience, but it's hampered by uninteresting characters and a disappointing presentation style. It wants to be a great sandbox game, but trades in staple design elements of the genre for player-controlled environmental manipulation, when they could all certainly live in harmony. The online multiplayer can be rather fantastic to play, but only when it wants to work. The presentation is nice, but is 2 steps down from the fidelity and presentation we got at E3 2012. Watch Dogs as a series certainly has potential. It introduces several interesting ideas to a genre that doesn't see all that much innovation anymore. However, it should also stand as a cautionary tale on overselling a product. It's certainly worth experiencing if you go into it with an open mind. But if you've been following its development over the past 2 years, you should steel yourself for being left in the dark to howl at the moon.